Abusia sabre de ubepie mu ewo Ghana hanum say one of the most trending issues amanfo ka ho asem ye maame Gertrude Tokonu sisi ebeka say wenya aye the former Chief Justice ewo krom hanum say sanse nano ada President John Dramani Mahama ebeka sa ye to nenum to twemu say maame no pe information a 5-member committee a yete wo mo so mu koye nhwehwemu efafa ne petition ho de ba ye ne de na kyese odi for ewo nsem a ya level against any nyina intisabre de ya gene dibre efri ne nsem se Chief Justice na eno na amanfo bebra hyase de omunsa tenetene papa ba akubisu anase ye ebo ni din a wo trend utimu se ne humfoni na etwegu screens no eso edin ekura papa yi Daniel Ofori amanfo chirema we de nye the big sis na we nye the big 3 we de the big 1 wono akase timi agine mu akokoden ama Chief Justice Gertrude Tokonu sabre de ne dibre ekura na fininsa de anase utimu se ye manemo piafo ye se onipa ya ade a wosa ye na abaso yempenem ne na say wayade na obebusa say who is this man and oye so fearless say oni onsuro hwe obi entimi nka ne hwe untimi mbehunehuna no say ono kwa one man etimi atwa petition ama ye kyerem kra petition no say what the 21 allegation of misbehavior and what the bo maame no and what the 4 allegation of incompetence and the bo maame say kekabo man say kwa do what the bo na be 25 when the petition ni mu a sabre de mampani ediso now inhwehwemu kire se yera Daniel Ofori wono na ye founder edema White Chapel Limited ejumekuo bi a omo ye ntu retail ni ade okrodwem a na ye hwemu a utresi na ye se way back in the 1980s and the 1990s no na papa we eba no retail enyuma was super market ni ade am na ye se wonu nso giremu tentemman pa wo ye investor na ye se wo invest wo businesses wo san ye philanthropist or ejuma oya adoye any ade ye chema waye chairman any chief executive officer de ma enyumekuo bebre wo krodwem ha papa ya nso na ti ejumekuo anidin de Advanced Ventures Limited wo Ghana krodwem a osan so edeli wo real estate mum na afei nso no engineering services mu any ade utimi hu se papa we de wo bo ne ho modem pa na echirema ye ka Ghana Stock Exchange he's one of the wealthiest investor was ejumekuo nu emu ye papa Daniel Ofori o that screen so there na chese utimu se eniema bebre ekura no na amafo chem se ye hwe ne dibre ne ade and from way back from the 1980s to the 1990s there na chese he knows a lot enti na otimi etena ase ede ne pen esi paper so echocho petitions ahodo we nyina elebo eniema maame Gertrude Tokonu ya sebe emra no ema ho kwan na afei nso after all this no 5-member committee nso kotine mu nso timi di information ba beto montin so chemu say yes it is true no krepa enti no Mr. President wo ho kwan say ni manimi ya no obetimi apamo maame wei edi efiri honum na sabre de mampani nso edi osi aye oyo isansa according to the constitution de obi the petition ekoma president a was say wotimi epaw ekuo bi a omo nso ebeden ebedi nsem ne cha hwehwe mu say de be ya enkoba ne say petition wo mo de ba omo anhwemu no mo fiti prekope yi no enti no after say committee na koyo mu hwehwe mu aba no enyiano a mo de be bre mampani enu no obegina so edi esi gina ye enti sa 5-member committee no after yera Daniel Ofori ne petition no wo mo nso ba ye ne de mo de be kan ye no na mampani edi o say aye oyo abusia ensem ne de bebre wo honum yenkotie ensem ni mu ntwemu.
Now this petition we're going to take quite a bit of time to deal with it because it's from a man called Daniel Ofori here. Now, let me explain to you about Daniel Ofori so that you can get it well. In 2011, Daniel Ofori sued EcoBank to enforce the terms of a share trade transaction between the parties. This would have compelled EcoBank to provide funds for Daniel Ofori to acquire shares in another bank. The High Court ruled in EcoBank's favor. Okay. Daniel Ofori is a very active guy at the Ghana Stock Exchange. He's one of the reasons why the stock exchange has been active. He's been there for a while. Daniel Ofori entered into a transaction with EcoBank. Sorry, we have to mention EcoBank's name, but the other bank we will not mention. And Daniel Ofori wanted a loan from EcoBank to acquire shares in another bank whose they had done, what did the bankers call it? A call-up offer. How did they call it? After the IPO and they need money and they do a call-up, that thing. So they had done a call-up offer, and so Daniel Ofori, as a shareholder, wanted to maintain his shares and acquire a few more shares. So he wrote to EcoBank for a loan, and then I think they were doing the transaction when, for some reason, the Bank of Ghana decided that that bank cannot do that XYZ, something like that. So in 2011, EcoBank then refused to advance Daniel Ofori the money. So Daniel Ofori sues in the High Court, saying that EcoBank has to give him the money. Okay. Now, the High Court rules against Daniel Ofori that you cannot have that. You can't have that. The case is entitled, I believe, Daniel Ofori versus EcoBank or EcoBank versus Daniel Ofori. There's Daniel Ofori versus EcoBank. There's EcoBank, Daniel Ofori, several of them around. Okay, so this is the said Daniel Ofori. So he sued, and the High Court said, no, you can't have the money. Then he goes to Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal confirms the decision. This is in 2013. The Court of Appeal confirms the decision of the High Court and held that EcoBank was not bound to pay the sum owed to Daniel Ofori. Entered the Supreme Court in 2018. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Daniel Ofori and held that Daniel Ofori was entitled to a sum of 13.2 million Ghana cedis and 30% interest on the said sum from the date accrued from June 2008. Now, the first transaction was in 2008. The conversation about buying shares of another bank was in 2008. That was the date, 2008 to the date of the judgment in July 2018. It's very interesting. Okay, so at this stage, Daniel Ofori has won the Supreme Court's decision. All right. At this time, Justice Tokonu is not a member of the Supreme Court. Chief Justice Gertrude Tokonu is not a member of the Supreme Court at the time the Supreme Court made this decision. All right. Now, EcoBank discovered instances of alleged fraud in the share transfer, and hence the case should be reopened. The court rejected the application and refused a review of the decision. This is very interesting. So later on, Justice Tokonu becomes a member of the bench of the Supreme Court. Now, EcoBank, in now looking at the matter, as Supreme Court says that they have lost, they need to pay Daniel Ofori so much money. They're looking at it, and their lawyers discovered that, but there's some fraud in the application, in the first High Court application. Look at the documents that he presented. Okay, so they allege fraud. Now, once you allege fraud in any matter, you can always go back to the court and say, oh, my laws, wait. I have now observed some fraud, and they should look at it. So EcoBank applied for the Supreme Court to reopen the matter, and they failed in that application. The Supreme Court did not reopen the matter. Then the EcoBank appealed against the Supreme Court's decision not to reopen the matter. I believe it's at this stage that Gertrude Tokonu is now part of the court, the Supreme Court. And in the review application, I think Gertrude Tokonu participates in the review application. EcoBank still lose the review application, but now it's not unanimous anymore. Justice Tokonu is able to convince other Supreme Court judges, including Justice Doche, to rule on her side, because in her argument, something called compound interest, based upon which the Supreme Court took their decision, is a nullity, because compound interest, she said, had been nullified by Parliament. There's nothing like compound interest. How can then the court calculate compound interest? These are the arguments in the document. So some of them sway on that side, but the majority are still with Daniel Ofori. Okay. EcoBank thereafter go to the High Court, seeking to stop the execution of the ruling of the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court they will not hear them on reopening the case, and they lost the review on that by a slimmer verdict than the unanimous 5-0 that they lost by in 2018, which was to say that they owe Daniel Ofori, they should go and pay. They come back and say, yes, we may owe him, but there's fraud. Supreme Court says, I will not listen to the fraud. They appeal against that, and then some Supreme Court judges, including Justice Tokonu, think that, look, you should listen to this because compound interest that you are talking about doesn't even exist. Anyway, so EcoBank now go to the High Court and ask the High Court judge that we have observed this fraud. Can you stop the execution of the Supreme Court ruling? And any court, even a lower court, can stop a decision of implementation of a decision of a higher court, so long as there's fraud. It's in the rules. So that is where we are. So EcoBank has now won the High Court's position that the thing should, the implementation, the execution should hold, stay of execution, that execution should be stayed pending the final determination of their fraud case against the said Daniel Ofori. Chachuchi Kata is one of the important lawyers of Daniel Ofori. Now, Daniel Ofori is a petitioner against the Lord Chief Justice. Let's look at it. Hello, Mr. Chachuchi Kata. How are you? We are talking about you on TV tonight. Not in bad terms, but in very neutral terms. So, Mr. Chikata is one of the most important lawyers of Daniel Ofori. And I told you to get me the video of Chikata and Tokono. Please look out for it. Let's use it. All right. So, okay, Mr. Chikata, thank you very much. Good. Now, so Daniel Ofori writes a petition to oust Justice Tokonu as Chief Justice. We are saying and giving you the history because Daniel Ofori feels that, and he's told people that it is because Justice Tokonu came to the Supreme Court that his matter started becoming logoligi, lagalaga, logoligi, lagalaga. Daniel Ofori feels that it is Justice Tokonu, or perhaps Daniel Ofori is being told by his lawyers that it is Justice Tokonu who is in fact, in the petition, he directly points to Justice Tokonu sitting on the EcoBank case. Listen, let's start. All right.